Hi guys, I'm Sachinta and welcome to Simple Economics. Our lesson for today is elasticity of demand. Now, elasticity of demand is a very practical concept that we must learn about, because when we understand elasticity of demand, we can understand a lot of situations in the market. Now, first we'll be learning about price elasticity of demand, that is PED. Now, PED is the responsiveness of quantity demanded of the concerned good with regard to a specific degree of change in price of the good at a specific time when all other factors are held constant. Now, in our earlier video, when we learned about demand, we understood what the law of demand means. That is, when the price increases, the quantity demand will decrease. So there's a negative relationship between the price and quantity demand. Now what we measure through elasticity is when price increases, by how much will the quantity demand change. Alright, so it's the responsiveness. It's a percentage value that we are calculating here. Now PED is calculated through this equation, that is by dividing percentage change in quantity demanded by percentage change in price. Now in order to master these sums, you have to do questions. All right, so the mathematical parts you will have to practice. Now I'll be explaining to you all the theoretic parts, because without understanding the theory or what the use of these equations are, there's no point in memorizing it. All right, because there will be no use in it. So there are two ways in calculating price elasticity of demand. The first way is point price elasticity of demand, where we calculate the elasticity at a certain price, at a certain point in the demand curve. Alright, so that's the simple method to which we use this equation. However, we also have arc price elasticity, where we calculate the price elasticity between 2 points. So this is used when calculating PED between two points with a big difference most of the times. Alright, now almost all the theories are explained using point price elasticity of demand, but you have to know arc price elasticity of demand, which is calculated. It's the same equation, only difference is instead of price you add 2 instead of the price which we calculate only at one point in the point price elasticity. Here we just add the two prices and divide by the two quantities. All right, so don't get confused, because in the exam they'll definitely ask you which type of elasticity you have to find. All right, so they'll tell you what you have to do. Now I told you there's a unique flow to my videos, so don't worry when I suddenly start talking about revenue, because producer revenue or consumer cost is closely linked with elasticity of good, and I'll be explaining these two concepts together. So producer revenue is basically found by multiplying price into quantity demanded. Now think you are selling apples. An apple is 10 rupees, you sell 10 apples, your producer revenue is 100 rupees. Just imagine you are buying apples, an apple is 10 rupees, you want to buy 10 apples, your consumer cost is 100 rupees. Alright, simple. Now there are different types of demand elasticities that we have to learn about. Now this cartoon is a clear depiction of the two main types of demand elasticities. Alright, so take a good look, because we are going to learn the theories now. Alright, perfectly elastic demand curve. Take a good look at the curve. It's a horizontal straight line. Now what this means is that the PED is infinity at every single point along this curve. Why is that? Now as you can see, if now the price here is 30, so at price 30 there could be demand, a quantity demanded of 50, a quantity demanded of 80, but we don't see a quantity demanded at any price above 30 or below 30. Alright, so the slightest increase in price will cause a complete loss in producer revenue. That is, consumers will give up the product entirely if the price increases. Now all the time, especially when we are talking about these PEDs, have an example in your head. Okay, now for this, a good example is a product with very close substitute, something like an anchor vanilla milk packet. So very narrow specialization, narrow definition also. That is not, I'm not just saying it's a milk packet, I'm saying it's a vanilla, it's the flavor and the brand. Okay, anchor vanilla milk packet. So if it's 50, if it increases by 50 rupees, no one's going to buy anchor vanilla milk packet. There are so many other brands if you want vanilla milk, or there are so many other flavors if you want anchor milk. All right, so that's the simple example you have to know for perfectly elastic demand curve. This guy knows it best. Okay, anyway, relatively elastic demand curve. This is the next type of elasticity where the PED is greater than 1. Now what this means is that a small change in price will cause a large change in quantity demanded. Now this happens for luxury goods or for goods with very close substitutes. Now just take for example Adidas and Nike. Alright, if the price of Adidas increases by a lot, you will just buy Nike. Alright, so there's a very close substitutes. So now I told you I'll be explaining about producer revenue also here. Now as you can see, let's take the first point where we produce 110 units at the price of 65. So if when we are producing at that point, all right, now just imagine we are Adidas, all right, we are producing 110 shoes at 65 rupees each, and oh my god, anyway, Adidas, all right, this kind of maths, no? So 110 into 65, our revenue is 7,150. But then when we increase the price by 80, this is a small change in price, the quantity demanded falls by 60 units. Alright, so then our revenue is just 4,000 rupees. So we have increased the price, but our revenue has greatly dropped. Alright, so it's a loss here. Alright, so by increasing the price, we haven't done anything good for ourselves. So these now you can understand how economics is important in day-to-day situations. Just learning these equations won't help you understand this. Alright, next we have the unitary elastic demand curve. Now most of the people get confused when doing sums on unitary elastic demand curves, because in this curve the PED is is constant throughout the curve, but this is not a straight line, this is a curve. Alright, so you cannot calculate percentages in this curve. So what you have to do is any sum you have to calculate it based on producer revenue. Okay, so you'll understand these when you do sums, but for now what you have to know is here the change in price results in an equal change in quantity demanded. That is, producer revenue is constant at every point. No matter whether you increase the price or decrease the price, the revenue will be the same. So you can either sell 90 units at 10 rupees, that will be 900 your revenue. Or when you increase the price to 30, there will be 30 for 30 units demanded. Then still you will have a revenue of 900 rupees. So your revenue will also be constant throughout. Next we have the relatively inelastic demand curve. Now here, now an example is a good with less substitutes or essential goods. That means when the percentage change in price is greater than percentage change in quantity demanded. That's when price changes by a large amount, quantity demanded will only change by a small amount. Now in the relatively elastic demand curve, when price increased a little, quantity demanded changed by a large amount. Here it's the opposite basically. Alright, so what also happens here is that when price increases, revenue will also rise. So price and revenue have a direct relationship in these types of curves. Now in the elastic one, there was a negative relationship. When price increased, revenue dropped. Why? Because your quantity demanded fell. Now just now for an essential goods, okay, we are producing rice. Alright, so look at this, 10 into 88 was 800. You can't see the quantities, but at the first point it was 88 units sold, so 880 our profit. Now when we increase the price just by 4 rupees, all right, our quantity demanded dropped only a little and our revenue increased up to 1120 rupees. All right, so change in price leads to a smaller percentage change in demand, therefore an increase in price will lead to an increase in revenue, and similarly a decrease in price will lead to a reduction in revenue. Next, the perfectly inelastic demand curve is where PED is less than 1. Quantity demanded will not change despite changes in price. Those people will continue to buy. A best example, essential medicine. No matter what the price is, you will somehow or the other try and buy it. So when price increases, obviously your revenue will increase. Why? The same amount of people will continue to buy your product. Now we learned about different types of elasticities, and in 3 of those we learned that the PED remains constant throughout. That was the perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, and the unitary elastic demand curves. In all those curves, the PED is constant throughout the curve. However, in the other two, that is the relatively elastic and relatively inelastic, the PED along the curve also is changing. Now this actually you will have to remember at the point where quantity demanded is 0, PED is equal to infinity, and at the point where price is 0, elasticity of demand is 0, and at the center of the curve it is unitary, and in between the center and the 0 point, elasticity of demand is less than 1, and between the center and the point where quantity demanded is 0, elasticity of demand is greater than 1. Now you have to remember this. So this is because the slope of the curve changes as it moves downwards. All right, so I hope you got the idea about how PED and revenue are interlinked and how they change and why they change. All right, so this is just the beginning. Now in our next videos we'll be going into in-depth details and we'll discuss more examples in our next video. Thank you.